In my act, I put a picture of my comedy promo shot, big smile, and I go, that's the face I paint on every day, and walk through the world like nothing is wrong. And most days, nothing is wrong. I've got a self-care plan, more good days than bad. But there are days when I'm wearing that mask. When I get on stage and I say I've come close enough to killing myself that I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, you can almost see the 25% of the population that's living with a mental challenge lean forward. They're thinking, this is not academic for him. And the 75% of the people who are neurotypical are leaning back like, dear God. And my job is to A, relate to the people who have mental illness, and B, help the people who don't understand what goes on. Why would someone do this? Why would someone behave this way? Why would, help decode it for them? There is a slice of the population, very creative, also live with a mental challenge, also have a higher rate of suicide. There have been a goodly number of comics who have ended their lives. Rich Jenny, super successful, couple of $1 million in the bank, had the highest rated Showtime special, Platypus Man, I think it was. And they were going to do another one. So it was on the books, and he shot himself in the chest. And people would ask me, well, he had millions of dollars in the bank, another Showtime special lined up. Why would he want to kill himself? The answer is, I believe that most people who die by suicide don't want to kill themselves. They just want to end the pain.
Welcome to Curiousaholic, the show where we question the past and imagine the future. Today we spoke to Frank King, a comic who calls himself the mental health comedian. Besides comedy, he is also a suicide prevention speaker and a multiple-time TEDx speaker. He has also worked on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno for more than 20 years as a writer. He also deals with depression and suicidality. His goal in life is to try to remove the stigma around these mental health conditions and help other people overcome these conditions. His brilliant comedy and keynote speeches help to shed light on these often misunderstood issues.
So if you liked this kind of content, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment on our YouTube channel, and make sure to follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms. It really helps us to grow the show. Also, if you want to appear as a guest on Curiousaholic, make sure to, send us an email at curiousaholic@gmail.com, and, we'll have you on the podcast. So without further ado, here is Frank King.
Frank.
Yes.
Besides being a comedian and a former writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years, you also work as a suicide prevention speaker. Some people would say that, being a comedian, you have to be someone happy in your life. We want to know, why is it that, a lot of comics have a dark past and have their own difficulties in life?
Well, comedy is often defined as tragedy plus time. So if you have darkness in your past and, time passes, then I think that a lot of creative people, not just comedians, often live with some sort of mental challenge. I think I believe that my depression, thoughts of suicide are simply the flip side of my creativity and imagination. Same brain, same wiring. I can teach you to write stand-up and perform stand-up. I cannot teach you to process the incoming information the way my brain does. My fourth TEDx talk was called Mental with Benefits, the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Illness, because I kept bumping into people who were super talented in one area or another, actor, singer, comedian, magician, and they had some sort of mental challenge. I thought to myself, this cannot be a coincidence. And come to find out that there is a slice of the population, very creative, also live with a mental challenge, also have a higher rate of suicide. So, there have been a goodly number of comics who have ended their lives. Rich Jenny, super successful, couple of $1 million in the bank, had the highest rated Showtime special, Platypus Man, I think it was. And they were going to do another one. So it was on the books, and he shot himself in the chest. So, and people would ask me, well, he had millions of dollars in the bank, another Showtime special lined up. Why would he want to kill himself? The answer is, I believe that most people who die by suicide don't want to kill themselves. They just want to end the pain. So I didn't want to kill myself when I came so close. I just wanted to end the pain. So I think there may be a connection between that sort of creativity or creative mind. Kanye West, for all his, politics aside, is probably one of the musical geniuses of his generation. Unfortunately, he's not a PR genius. That would have been helpful. but I do believe he is probably one of the musical geniuses and he lives with bipolar disorder. So, and there's a book called The Bipolar Advantage, and it goes back in history, starts with Alexander Hamilton. And from all the historical reports, it appears he may have been living with bipolar disorder. So it's like I said, I couldn't believe it was a coincidence, and I don't think it is. So it's not just comics; it's people in a creative field.
Okay.
So how do you think that connection happens between, someone that has mental health issues and the creative mind?
I think, like I said, I believe my creativity, imagination is simply the flip side of my depression and thoughts of suicide. There's a reason that I think the way I do. There's a reason when somebody heckles me that I can come back at them without even thinking, literally without even thinking. I've come back with a heckler. Young woman was being thrown out of the bar, the comedy club. She got drunk, got really raucous. Finally, they couldn't take it. They decided to throw her out. She's headed toward the door. All of a sudden, she's turning back to me, turning around back to me. And I'm thinking, well, probably heard something sounded like her name because drunks are voice activated. And she screamed at me, F you. And I said, without thinking, not even for practice. And got a standing ovation. And people came up afterwards and go, how'd you think that up? I didn't think it. When you heard it, I heard it. I have no idea where that came from.
Yeah,
so
it
I
just
think
came like
that,
organically.
Yeah, it's something the way my brain is wired, because everybody else in the room hears it, but they don't process it the same way. They don't turn it around into something funny in a flash. I just think it's almost akin to a superpower. And most superheroes have some. Superman had kryptonite. If you've seen the movie Elektra with Jennifer Garner, she lives with obsessive compulsive disorder. Her character does. So it seems like, and Batman saw his folks killed in front of him when he was 7 or 8 years old. You don't think he's got a little PTSD, and Superman was shot off the planet before it blew up with his folks. Separation anxiety, maybe. So almost every superhero has something. I mean, Spider-Man got bit by a spider. Okay, not everybody, but yeah. So I try to think of it as a superpower, and the reason I did Mental with Benefits was really to change the frame for kids. Because if you can convince a child that, yes, you have a mental illness, but you know what? You probably got some mental ableness that your peers can't touch. Make them feel special in that way, and then treat the mental illness, but wrap your arms around and embrace and enhance and energize whatever their mental ableness is. If they have OCD, for goodness sake, steer them to a career where they value precision and attention to detail, accounting, engineering, banking, where they pay you really well. And there are 30 or 40 Fortune 500 companies that are specifically hiring people on the autism spectrum for the one thing that they do better than anybody else, and paying them handsomely. 85% of people on the autism spectrum are unemployed. They get through high school, but post-high school, there aren't that many benefits. There's not really a track to run on. So these companies realize, let's not worry about what they can't do. Let's take a look at what they can do and put them to work doing that. So that's why I did it for kids, and I got to tell you, I've never met a parent with a child with a challenge, as long as they were, relatively high functioning, that didn't have some other ability.
A lot of times they do. Yeah, that's what we noticed. People on the spectrum, they have such, crazy abilities, to the extreme compared to the, average person or person who's normal.
Yeah.
Could be focus, could be, it's and I have that kind of focus. I'm not on the spectrum, but my wife could tell you that if I get focused on something, she could be standing behind me screaming my name, and it's a kind of a gift and a curse in that way. I was in a grocery store one time. I'm in one lane checking out. She's like 4 lanes over checking out. Apparently, she'd been calling my name for almost a minute. And the guy in front of her got tired of her yelling my name, and he turns and goes, "Hey, dumbass." And I went, "What?" It broke
Oh,
through.
okay. Oh my goodness.
It
Okay.
broke through. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what got your attention.
Yeah. And that's why I think businesses should, they should try to create a neurodiverse workplace where everybody doesn't think the same. Because I think it's far more creative if you have people who think differently working together.
To see the strengths in people instead of their weaknesses.
Yes, exactly.
basically.
And like I said, embrace them, enhance them, energize them, celebrate them, pay them appropriately for that kind of, gift.
Totally agree. Yeah.
I mean, there's some great creators, right? Like Elon, I think, right? He's on. He has some kind of. What does he have exactly? I'm not sure what kind of disability he has.
He may have bipolar disorder as well.
Bipolar.
Bill Gates has dyslexia.
Right.
I mean, there's a laundry list of people that are famous, infamous, rich,
Right.
actors. Yeah, it's not uncommon for creative people to have a mental challenge. The trick is to the balance, to stay in balance, so that you don't end up, ending your life.
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
speaking of your life, we want to get into a little bit your life and your career in general. So we know that you work for the Tonight Show. Can you tell us a little bit, what that experience was like?
Yes, my wife and I did my first open mic on April 1st, 84. Halfway through my set, I heard a voice inside my head that said, "You're home." So I knew I was in the right place. I always knew that's where I belonged. And so a year and a half later, I said to my girlfriend, now my wife of 37 years, "I'm going on the road to be a comedian. You want to come along for the ride?" Thinking she'd go, "Oh, hell no." She goes, "Yeah." So we were on the road 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, no home.
Wow.
7 years.
Wow.
Now, during that period, Jay Leno was the permanent guest host for Johnny Carson. When Johnny took a vacation, Jay Leno filled in. And Johnny would pull up on a Friday night and go, "I'm taking next week off," which meant Jay had 4 monologues the following week, 18 jokes per monologue, basically to cobble together over a weekend. So he started hiring road comics to fax in jokes. And that's how I got started, faxing in a dozen, 2 dozen jokes when Jay put out the call, "Hey, I'm working next week. I need jokes." And then when he got the job for real, he let most of the contract labor go, but kept some of us on. And I wrote for him until, at a distance, until he went to CNBC.
So, were there like any experiences that you had while you were working for the Tonight Show that may have impacted your mental health, or was it like all fine and dandy while you were working there?
No, it was a great way to work your funny muscle, because I went to bed thinking funny, got up thinking funny, because I needed a dozen, 2 dozen jokes that day. So you're constantly looking for material in your surroundings. Comedians are great observers of things, great noticers of things. We notice things almost like police officers, in that we notice things, other people see them, but don't make note. Comics constantly ask themselves, "What's wrong with this picture?" That's where a lot of the comedy comes from, is asking yourself that question, "What's wrong with this picture?" So it was a great exercise of my funny muscle. And, it kept me about thinking about other things. And it's an intense, 24 jokes in a day. As a friend of mine said, some of those were just funny misspellings of my name, but you want to try to get in 24 a day. The idea was that maybe someday, if you turned in that many jokes every day, that if Jay needed another full-time in-house writer, that was the dream, that you would be asked to come in. And a number of guys did make it into the on location staff there in Burbank. I had a failure to launch. I never got that close, but I had quite a few jokes in the monologues during the time I wrote for him. And I'm co-author on 4 books on men's mental health. And on the last one, I contacted his assistant, Helga, and I said, "Helga, do you think Jay would write me a blurb, help us market this last book on men's mental health?" And Leno sent me a really sweet blurb for the cover of that last book. He's just a really nice guy.
That's great. Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet of him. Yeah.
Can you like walk me through the process? How do you write 24 jokes in a day? Like, what's going through your head?
Well, what I did was I watched the show the night before, and I wrote down the premises of all 18 jokes, because we know he likes the premise. And then I would try to write a better punchline for that premise. My favorite was this. Leno said, there's a condom manufacturer in Switzerland. Should we really be buying condos from a country that makes cheese with holes in it? And I thought there's a better joke. And the joke I wrote was, which he used, there's a condom manufacturer in Switzerland, but the Swiss, it's not just a condom. It's a condom, it's a corkscrew, it's a screwdriver, which was better than the previous one. So that I got a lot of jokes that way. I also, back in the day, I read the USA Today and the New York Times back when people read papers. And the USA Today is color-coded. Purple is life, red is sports, green is money. And I realized that not many comics look for jokes in the money section. So I figured if I wrote jokes from the money section, that I'd be the only one probably sending them in with premises from the money section. So I got a lot of jokes on simply because nobody else bothered with finance, jokes on finance. So there were tricks and things you could do like that to, and I tried to write in his voice. I tried when I was writing, hey, two guys writing about, so that when he got it, it would sound like him. And it would sound like him when he delivered it. You wouldn't know that it was written by somebody else. And one time, he did the joke I sent in syllable for syllable. Didn't change a syllable. That was a high point. Also, his first show, when he took over, I had two jokes in the first monologue. The first one was, this is back when there were killer bees in Texas. And so I said, the guy got stung to death by bees in Texas. Turned out they weren't killer bees. They were just regular honeybees upset over the Rodney King verdict. Got a huge laugh.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the other one was Dan Quayle, former vice president. There was a show called Murphy Brown, a sitcom starring Candace Bergen. And her character got pregnant out of wedlock, single mother. And Dan Quayle, somebody asked Dan Quayle about that. And he says, I think that mocks the importance of fathers. Quayle said, and I quote, where would I have been without my dad? And the punchline I wrote was, my guess, Vietnam. And so those are two jokes I had in the very first show that he did after he took over for Johnny.
Oh, yeah. Well,
What year was this?
Let's see. Mid... Like 2005, 2000, no, couldn't have been. Yeah, 2000, early 2000s, I think, because Jay went to CNBC, I think, in like 2010, 2011. So I'm guessing it was early 2000s.
Early 2000s, okay.
Didn't he take over The Tonight Show in 92 or in the early 90s? Or am I wrong?
I think he did it for 20 years, I think, and he had really high ratings. I think they thought he was getting too old. I don't think that's accurate. I think the younger people watch Letterman because it's later, or whoever took Letterman's place. Because the younger people generally stay up later. So I thought, and Leno appealed to middle America. His jokes were very much middle of the road, no politics really, or if he did a political joke, he took on both sides, and he was very popular and I think that's why he got the job, because when Leno would travel, and he'd go to some small town in Nebraska, he would go to the NBC affiliate and ask him, could I cut a couple of promos for you while I'm here? Or could I do anything for you? And so when they got the affiliates together to decide, vote on a straw poll, who gets the Tonight Show, Letterman or Leno? Leno had done his homework, done his networking. They'd all met him. He's done things for them. So overwhelmingly, they voted Leno. And NBC thought, okay, well, I guess we'll give it to Jay. So he's a great business person as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, he's a cool individual, and also a very avid car enthusiast.
Yes, cars, motorcycles. And when I had my first open heart surgery, and I got out of cardiac ICU into a regular room, the first phone call I got was from Jay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he'd heard from another writer that I'd had an aortic valve replacement. Yeah, I heard you had heart surgery. Good thing you didn't have it in L.A. They take it out and leave it out.
Yeah. How did that make you feel to get a call from him?
Yeah.
Well, what happened was there was another comic in the room and I couldn't reach the phone. So my comic friend picked up the phone And of course, he hears, "Hey, it's Jay Leno. Is Frank there?" And the comic thought it was another comic doing an impression.
Oh,
So he hung up on it.
Oh, really?
And
Oh, my
Leno called
goodness.
right back and he goes, "No, this is Jay." And my friend's like, "Oh my God, that is Jay Leno." And he handed me the phone. Yeah, he's just a genuinely nice. He years ago, I had a college agent named Joey and Joey Edmonds. And Joey used to be a college act, and he had a partner. And his partner broke his leg. This is like in the 70s. And so he called Jay because he knew Jay lived near the college where they had a booking and said, "Would you mind filling in for us? My partner broke his leg." And Jay said, "No, I'd be happy to. It's going to be a nice weekend. I'll take my back. I ride down." So Leno goes down, does the gig, comes back. And Joey calls him and goes, "Jay, did you get the money?" And he goes, I really couldn't take the check. There's eight kids. I really felt bad. And Joey says, "You weren't paid by the head. You were paid to show up." I just didn't feel right about it. So now fast forward 20 years, Jay Leno gets the job as the spokesperson for Doritos. And they're paying him $1 million. And so Joey gets an envelope in the mail from Jay. And inside is a photocopy of a check for $1 million and a Post-it note. And it says simply, "Hey, Joey, I cashed this one." 20 years.
That's funny.
Wow.
Wow. Really?
He is famous for a prodigious memory. And obviously, So,
to remember for such a long time.
Yeah.
and what, I mean, revenge is a dish best served cold. Comedy sometimes is as well.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So working on the Tonight Show, I want to also ask, do you think that, comedy writers on shows such as that, or like even Saturday Night Live, do they get enough credit for all these jokes that they come up with?
Well, they get a paycheck. And on the Tonight Show, they're in the Writers Guild. And if you're in the Writers Guild for 5 years, you're vested, meaning you're going to have health benefits for life and a retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a scale. You're getting paid really good money to sit in front of a computer screen and be funny. So it's, I bought jokes. I've sold jokes. I sold jokes to Joan Rivers, to Dennis Miller. It's very common. You don't get credit. The thing about Jay was he never used the topical jokes that we wrote for him in his act on the road. So if you wrote a bunch of jokes for Jay and they were topical, I could do them in the comedy club because he doesn't do them in his act on the road. So it was a great way to keep up on topical humor.
Okay.
Yeah, so at least they wouldn't be stealing like jokes that the writers would be writing, right?
Yep. So
Okay.
it's if I'm a contract labor comic writer and I get a joke on, that means I had a better joke than the half dozen or more comedy writers who are in-house. That made me feel really good because we're all working with the same source material, all working with the same premises. But I had the joke that Leno liked the best of the jokes on that premise.
So then, okay, so are like multiple writers kind of competing to get their jokes, spoken out by Leno?
Yes,
Kind
and
of
what
show
I would
that.
do was, if there was a percentage mentioned in the joke, like 25%, I would make it 23%. That way, if another writer and I came up with the same joke, parallel thought, but Leno goes, "Yeah, 23% of," I would know that's mine. And he never missed sending me a check when it was my joke.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Interesting. Okay. So then just to understand, so the jokes that you come up with that he uses on the show, can you reuse those for your own stand-ups?
Yes.
Or oh, you can?
If he was doing them on the road in a concert, performance, then I couldn't.
Oh, okay.
But-
Okay.
No matter how good they were, he stuck to his, pre-written material. So I could do the jokes in Dothan, Alabama, the night after he did it on the Tonight Show.
Okay.
have
So
been-
how does it work with the rights? Like who owns like the jokes? Like when you're doing it on these shows? Like
Well, he technically owns that joke.
okay.
He paid me for it. He paid me for it. But because he's not using it beyond that first night.
Okay.
Like I said, if he'd been collecting the best topical jokes of the week, and when he went out to do a concert, he did those, then I couldn't do those that week or the next or whenever in a comedy club because, he did it in a different venue. He did it in concert. So, okay. But he never, for whatever reason, no matter how good the jokes were, he never did topical jokes. Maybe because Seinfeld never did topical jokes. I worked with him, I opened up for him at a club in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he said, because I work so hard on the jokes and with topical jokes, they age quickly. It's with a 24-hour news cycle. And I mean, you could do a joke one night and the world has moved on and you can't do it the next night because something has happened. So that's why Seinfeld never wrote topical jokes, because he worked so hard on the ones he had. He didn't want to work that hard and then have to toss it, a couple of nights later.
So you would try to write jokes, I guess, that would kind of stand the test of time almost, right? That you could kind of reuse almost whenever.
Yes, evergreen.
Okay.
Now, there are topical jokes. You can do some topical jokes where you've written a joke, let's say last year, and then something happens with the same politician this year or something similar. You can bring it back and update it with the new information and the new news story. But those are relatively few and far between. Jeffrey Dahmer. This past year, I guess last year, they did a documentary on Netflix. So there were comics who'd done Jeffrey Dahmer jokes years ago, but because he became news again, because of the documentary on Netflix, they could bring them all back.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
Because now it's in the public. It was one of the most popular shows for a while on Netflix. So now it's back in the public consciousness.
Interesting how that works.
So I guess that's how, like you mentioned, that comics are able to notice certain things, right? Like, how does this new Jeffrey Dahmer documentary fit in the bigger picture, right? And the comics started making jokes on that.
Yes. I've got an acquaintance, a black woman in Philadelphia, who had a great joke about Jeffrey Dahmer, and she brought it back because he was on Netflix. And it used a racial epithet that people use about black people. But she's black, so she can do that. Unfortunately, the comedy clubs nowadays, people tend to get offended easily on behalf of other people generally. Back in the day when I was in the clubs, if you didn't like the show, you went to the box office, got your money back. You didn't throw a can of seltzer at the comic. You didn't take them apart and try to cancel them on social media.
Yeah.
I would not do a comedy club today unless it was part of a plea bargain, because I'm just afraid, that I'm going to step on somebody's toes, offend somebody, and they're going to try to cancel me. And there have been comics who have been canceled.
So that's kind of like our next topic that we want to talk about, since you mentioned that. Comedy is such an integral part of our society, but it seems like there's like more censorship and cancel culture that's growing nowadays towards comics. So one of my first questions on this, do you think that comics should have the right to joke about anything? Or is there a certain limit that you can't cross?
Yes and yes. I think there are limits, but very few. I think a comic should be able to go on stage at the comedy club and joke about just about anything in any fashion that they choose. Now, that said, when I worked running a comedy club in Raleigh, North Carolina for a little while, and I ran the open mic night. And comics would ask me about what they could, is there anything I can't say? I said, well, you if you're not black, you shouldn't be using the N-word. If you're not gay, you shouldn't say queer. And you should not use the C word, referring to women, unless you have one. Those are my 3 rules.
Okay.
Because in comedy, you should never be shooting down. You should always be shooting truth to power. And so you can make fun of any group to which you belong. Because I live with 2 mental illnesses, I can make jokes. I can tell funny stories about depression and thoughts of suicide, things that have happened to me that if I were neurotypical, I could not get away with. So but comedy clubs, the sad thing is comics for decades have been the canary in the coal mine. They're the ones that alert the public to something wrong. And I'll give you a good example. In the 1950s, Comics were joking about Catholic priests and choir boys. The joke was, well, when is it time? When do you know? Let's see. How do you know it's time? How do you know when it's time to have sex in the Catholic Church? When the big hand is on the little hand. That's the 1950s.
Damn.
The Catholic priest scandal didn't break in the public until the mid 90s. Comics have been joking about that for decades. And nobody took notice. Nobody, Jeffrey Epstein. And not Epstein, Harvey
Weinstein.
Yeah.
Yes. A decade before he got busted, comics at award shows and other things were making jokes about his sexual predatory behavior. And but it didn't come to a head until the Me Too movement. So that's what I think we're going to lose if comics are self-censoring, if they're having to think before they speak or before they joke, if they're worried about somebody getting canceled. Now again, if you're not Black, don't use the N-word. If you're not gay, don't use a pejorative in reference to gays. If you're not a woman, don't I mean, there are limits, but any group to which you belong, you can make fun of. You should be able to make fun of. And you should be able to make fun of what's happening in the world politically, but that's not the way it is in clubs anymore.
Much more tiptoeing around and walking on eggs.
So have you heard of any other comics recently being canceled?
Well, now every culture has a cancel culture. And in some cases, it's appropriate because the person deserves to be canceled. What's his name? 2 initials. Redheaded, big tall guy.
CK?
Yes, Louis C.K. The guy was exposing himself to female comics in the green room. I'm sorry. You need to be canceled. That's the canceling offense in my mind. And that's why most cultures have a cancel culture, because there are people who deserve to be canceled. He's back on the road. He's back doing his thing. But, there was a time when... So I think... a cancel culture exists for a reason. I think it's been taken way too far.
I mean, what Louis C.K. did, right? He wasn't joking. Like, he did what he did. So I think also that it's a warranted cancellation.
Yeah. Because he exposed himself. Yeah.
One of my favorite comics is a guy in England, Jimmy Carr. Got a baby face, cute little laugh. His jokes, although extremely well written, are just
very.
I mean, people with Tourette's. What makes them tick? It's hysterical and incredibly well written, but it's not politically correct. But he is so popular. He has a show of his own. He does shows all. I mean, he is known for being out there that way. No holes barred. Now you notice he doesn't pick on women. I mean, he doesn't shoot down. That's the thing. You never want to shoot down. You always want to shoot up at power. But his stuff is extremely well written, even though it's filthy.
He's very. I don't think. So a lot of people can get offended if they're if they're easily offended by it.
He's got a thing on YouTube, the world's most offensive joke, and I how can you not look at it? So I looked at it. And what he does, he says, look, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to start telling jokes. They're going to be mildly offensive in the beginning, and I'm going to crank it up a notch offensively as I go until somebody in the audience screams, oh, for fuck's sake. And he did it. To watch him go and get more and more and more and more offensive, it was brilliant. That's him. I tell comics, young comics, anybody who asks me for advice on comedy, look, if you're going to do an F word in your act, do lots of them. Be the F word comic, because one F word is not going to get you a gig. It can keep you from getting a gig. So commit to it. If you're going to be a dirty comic, be a dirty comic. Just work cable or work clean. Pick. You got to pick. And so, and again, I'm happy not to be in comedy clubs and be judged joke by joke by joke by joke. Somebody called me up. They got mad at me about something. They go, we're going to make sure you never work in a comedy club again. I said, can I get that in writing? I was on campus, University of Montana Billings. Two nice young men are driving me around the radio stations because we're doing a suicide prevention presentation open to the public. So we're generating, perhaps ticket sales. And so as we're driving around the radio station to radio station, one of them said to me, Frank, comics on campus really struggle. I mean, people get offended. People get, they get their toes stepped on. Are you worried about stepping on anybody's toes tonight in Billings at the university? And I said, well, if I was doing comedy, I would be extremely careful. But I'm on stage doing a suicide prevention talk. So my philosophy is, if you get your toes stepped on because of my suicide prevention talk, F you, because nobody ever died from sore toes. That's the great thing about being a speaker. They're paying you to be just that blunt, as opposed to comedy, where it's somewhat subjective. Yeah, I get away with murder as a speaker that I could never get away with as a comic. I'm joking about sucking on a gun barrel. Yeah, spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think I heard one of your speeches and you did say that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, why is it different though? What makes the big difference between public speaking versus comedy? Why can we
Why are they judged differently?
Well, I'm there for a purpose beyond making them laugh.
Okay.
I'm there to literally save lives. So I feel like I need to say whatever I need to say to make that happen. And I mean, I don't drop the F-bomb, and I don't. It's not like a comedy club dirty show. I mean, I'm just saying I can say things. I can make fun of people with depression, thoughts, suicide, because I got them both. I'm double qualified. I can make fun of people. The guy called me the other day. He said, Frank, I'm sorry I'm late calling you. I didn't mean to leave you hanging. And I said, you want to rephrase that? Yeah. So I mean, normal people, that would shock and probably disgust a normal person if I was normal, but I'm not normal. And because suicide and mental illness carry such a stigma, people generally don't talk about it unless you bring it up. And then almost everybody has a story. So my job is simply really to start the conversation by revealing these illnesses that I have and all I've been through. Gives people permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences. So yeah, in the comedy club, you're just there to make them laugh. But I'm there to save lives.
Yeah, there's a bigger purpose there. I understand.
So you have more leeway to be more blunt and more kind of,
say things that, might offend people because offend their sensibilities because I have offended people, their sensibilities because how blunt I am about thoughts of suicide and depression, mine and others. Mm-hmm. I've had people, I just can't believe you can get away with that. Well, I don't care,
So yeah, what is your reaction to that? You just, like you said, you just brush it off kind of thing, or do you does it bother you sometimes?
No, I'll apologize. I said, listen, I did not mean to upset you. I said, but I found that the more blunt I am, the more lives I save. If I don't want to dance around it, because that's sort of reinforcing the stigma that I have to dance around it. More often, people come up and thank me for being so upfront and blunt about those things. Because again, I give them permission. I do this, my talk. We do general Q&A. And I tell the audience, look, if you got a question you want to ask or a story you want to tell, and you don't want to do it in front of everybody, I'll hang out 30, 45 minutes. I'll take all that individually. Sometimes 2 people, sometimes 10. Each one has a story or a question, something that I have given them permission. They know they can ask me. I'm not going to judge. I hear the same music they do. We can relate. So it's that's I've been told many times, we just brought you in here to start this conversation because nobody talks about it. It all crystallizes around me because I'm vulnerable. I tell my stories. I get choked up. I'm a guy. Most guys don't talk about things like this out loud. This weakness. Men are strong. Big boys don't cry. Well, I got news for you. that's 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in North America right now are men, in part because big boys don't cry. They don't reach out. They feel like they have to be strong.
Yeah. We had a guest on our podcast actually that kind of talks about suicide as well, and he wrote a kid's book. Remember, it was Sometimes Daddy Cries. So like he wrote a kid's book about how sometimes even your dad, who's technically supposed to be the superhero, also could have issues as well. Just like how a kid could have a stomach ache, and it's easy to talk about, but no one's going to talk about the suicidal ideation. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a safety managers meeting, 1,000 guys. I got on stage, did like a 15-minute TEDx style talk on suicide prevention, and I went to the exhibit hall floor to the booth where where people would come up if they wanted to book me. And this guy comes up. He's probably in his 50s, grizzled. He's a lineman, works on top of a electric pole, and a friend of his had died by suicide like 14 months earlier. And he's standing there in front of me. He's crying. This manly man, grizzled old guy, is crying because he said, I wish you had told me. I would have done anything for him. Why would he not, I mean, he's probably never had this conversation with anyone else. But, I did the best I could to explain about the pain. Probably didn't want to kill himself. Chances are he just wanted to end the pain.
I heard once, like Jim Carrey say how for him depression means when your body needs deep rest from like maybe the lies or like the mask that you're putting on in life, that you want to just get away from that and just be who you really are, your true essence, and have that rest of your soul before re-entering into the world.
Yeah, you put on a mask. I in my act, I put a picture of my comedy promo shot, big smile, and I go, that's the face I paint on every day, and walk through the world like nothing is wrong. And most days, nothing is wrong. I've got a self-care plan. More good days than bad. But there are days when I'm wearing that mask. We used to get together before the pandemic, 5 or 6 of us crazy people at a coffee shop. I called it the Crazy Coffee Clutch. And we could all were mentally ill, all could take our game faces off, mask, and just be ourselves for an hour. Now, I must tell you, some people at other tables who overheard what we were talking about were terrified. We're talking, well, so-and-so jumped off a building. Hi. 5 stories. Oh man, I would never jump off a 5-story, but you could walk away from that. Or worse, you could be crippled, and now you're really depressed. And the people overhearing this are, because it's not really, your average coffee shop conversation. But it was great for us because we could just be ourselves for an hour.
Yeah, because most people don't relate to that or they don't understand that, right? But like if you're living that, like it's easier for you to like openly speak about it, I guess.
Yes. When I get on stage and I say I've come close enough to killing myself that I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, you can almost see the 25% of the population that's living with a mental challenge lean forward. They're thinking, this is not academic for him. And the 75% of the people who are neurotypical are leaning back like, dear God.
Yeah. I could understand how that works. Yeah.
And my job is to A, relate to the people who have mental illness, and B, help the people who don't understand what goes on. Why would someone do this? Why would someone behave this way? Why would, help decode it for them?
Get normal people, average people to really get into the shoes of people who deal with issues like this.
I tell them the good news is 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent. They can't make up their mind. 8 out of 10. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to the attempt, which means I tell them you can save a life, you can make a difference, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here. And that is having a conversation if you know how. And before we leave today, I will teach you how. So that they begin to recognize the signs of depression. Or when somebody says something, they realize it's a hint. It wasn't meant the way it came out. It's actually a hint that they're thinking about killing themselves. So that's how you save lives, is listen and watch and know what to listen and watch for.
You know what I often hear from like people who've had, let's say children of theirs lost to suicide or other family members, it's always like they were so happy. Everything seemed fine a week ago or a few days leading up to it. So they're just so like struck by this event, and you're like, how could they not have seen any of the signs? Or is it so subtle that you can just miss it and think, the person is okay?
Well, once I've taught you the signs and symptoms, if you're willing to step up and ask the tough questions. And by the way, that is a sign that somebody may be getting ready to kill himself. If they've been depressed for a long time and now all of a sudden they're happy for no apparent reason, they may be happy because for the last 3 or 4 days, they have chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end.
That's scary. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they're
it's-
looking forward to it.
Yeah, they're looking
that's
for
why
it. And so, but you're happy because they're finally happy. Oh my God.
yeah,
So-
I think,
Yeah, that transmits the wrong message. Yeah.
I think also like without like ill intent, family members who deal with people like this, or friends, that know that maybe you have depressive thoughts, when they see that you're becoming happy, they're like, oh, okay, finally,
Yeah.
like things are getting better. Like, oh, okay, I don't need to deal with this, because it can be emotionally taxing on the people
Yeah.
that, have to speak with you. And a lot of people feel like they're burdens on others. So,
And by the
Yeah,
way,
it's
that's
just
what I tell parents of a child who is living with depression, maybe thoughts of suicide. Don't tell the child you have so much to live for. Because trust me, as somebody who lives with suicidality, that's not going to put a dent in it. It's not about how much they have to live for. What you should say to them is, look, I bet it's crossed your mind that you are a burden and we would be better off without you. And in no uncertain terms, are you A, a burden, or B, would we ever be better off without you? Just at random times, because what you're doing is you're joining the conversation in the kid's head. That they're thinking, because one of the elements of suicidality is that I'm a burden, the world would be better off without me. My folks would be better off without me. So join that conversation and reassure them, nope, no way would we ever be better off without you. You are not a burden.
Yeah, that's a good advice for sure. Are there like are there other comics that you know of that, might have been canceled or
I don't like recently, going back to the censorship cancel culture topic. I don't know. Do you know Matt Rife? Have you heard of him?
Oh yeah, on Showtime, very popular.
Very popular nowadays. And he was also facing backlash because of some of the jokes that he was making again. But he kind of like did not care at all. He went bluntly to those critics and said, well, he even like set up a website for them to like go buy this product and
selling helmets?
helmets for like people easily offended or something.
Yeah. I think that's the proper attitude. If you're going to do it, you stand behind what you've done. He obviously knows this. I think it's one of the most popular shows on Netflix, comedy specials. Controversy,
Yeah, I think so.
people tune in. What the hell did he say? So I think he's very smart that way. I mean, he's running a risk, but,
what he was saying was like, there's comedy, there's different sorts of art forms that different people like. If you don't like what I'm saying, then just tune out.
Tune into something else. Yeah.
yeah,
do
it's
you
a
agree
passive
with that?
medium. Get your money back or turn the TV off.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Robert Mapplethorpe. He's an artist. He's got this famous picture of a guy with his fist up to his elbow in another guy's ass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was part of a traveling exhibit of his works. And one of my comic friends went to see the exhibit and was doing comedy that night. And he goes, his name's John McDowell. I went to the Robert Mapplethorpe exhibit. There's a guy with his arm, hand, fist up to his elbow up a guy's ass. It's not only uncomfortable, it violates several WBA boxing regulations.
Wait, what?
That's funny.
Yeah, but
Like it's against the rules in boxing or something.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
But that traveling art exhibit offended a great number of people. But I believe art is supposed to move you emotionally.
We did also want to touch upon, kind of the importance of human connection with comedy, because we think that, why is it that humans laugh? What compels them to laugh? Is it because they have this need to connect with others, find relatability? A lot of like the comedy nowadays for like younger people with online memes and such, it's all about, I relate to this. I feel part of a tribe. What is your opinion on that? Just the nature of why people want to laugh and, tell jokes.
Well, laughter is an international language. every culture, they laugh. Comedy is a game of connection. You're standing on stage in front of 300 people or 3,000 people, and whatever you're telling them, they have to somehow connect with, relate to. If they don't relate to what you're saying, they're not going to laugh. That's the magic of comedy, is making it relatable. Eddie Murphy said after he did a first special, Raw, I think, was the special. The second one wasn't near as good. And Eddie said, you know why? Because I've gotten famous by then. And nobody wants to hear what happened in a limousine that day. Not relatable.
Wow, that's
But
interesting.
his first special was all about growing up poor and eating ketchup sandwiches, his mother beating him with a shoe. You know, I mean, it was things everybody could relate to. So when you get on stage, they're not going to laugh unless you become of one mind. That's why I tell comics, make sure that you paint the picture vividly enough for the audience. You take them there with you. People say, I say funny things, you know, everyday life. I don't know how to translate that to the stage. I say, you take them there. You paint the picture. I'll give you an example. I'm in the bank. The teller has a horrible cold. And there's an older woman standing in front of me, working with a teller, and a young man standing behind me. And the teller is sneezing and sniffling and coughing. And finally, the older woman says to the teller, honey, you need to get something to suck on. And I turned to the guy behind me and I said, where's the line form for that?
That's hilarious. I already knew where you were going with that when you said the word.
So
She set it up.
Yeah, you set it up, yeah.
I take it to the bank. I paint the picture, teller, old woman, me, young guy. So you have to
Paint. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more specific, a Buick is funnier than a car. You know, very specific. Be as specific as absolutely possible when you're telling a joke. And yeah, it's a game of connection. If they don't connect with you, if they don't buy the premise, then they're not going to laugh. Or if they don't understand the premise, or if it doesn't relate to their life experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so also we want to kind of talk about, you know, this technology that's, you know, arising, especially last year with AI. How do you think comedy is going to change, you know, as technology keeps progressing and with the advent of AI? Like, where's this going to go?
I've experimented with, you know, write me X number of jokes based, you know, on this premise. And they're okay, but not, I don't think it can be as creative as a human at this point. But, you know, AI learns. And I can write a keynote using ChatGPT 4.0. Or I can put my keynote in there and say, okay, now give me a keynote based on this in the voice of Jerry Seinfeld. Well, Seinfeld was on the air and off the air before 2021. So all of his shows are, you know, available somewhere on the internet. So AI can find those, you know, and pull from those. So the tone is in Jerry Seinfeld's voice. So I don't think the AI can be as creative as I can yet.
Do you think that's going to remove some of the creativity aspect of the comedy?
No, I think it's going to put a lot of copywriters out of business because it's just so easy to. I mean, it's changed my speaking business. I have to propose myself to speak at a group, but I can say, if they say, give us a 600 word summary of your presentation. I put the keynote in, I put my website in, I put their website in, and I say, give me a 600 word summary of my presentation and make it relevant to this group and this website. And like magic. Yeah. What it does is it reads my website, their website, and it tells them what problems they have that I can solve. Why is Frank a good fit? It's amazing. That's the benefit to a speaker, is being able to crank those out and make it very customized to the group, to the industry.
But in terms of writing, you know, good jokes, do you think, like, since AI lacks that life experience and the hardships and, you know, mental health issues that some comedians deal with, or can they try to mimic that somehow by just a vast amount of information and constant, you know, feed of?
I think
stand-ups
they
and
may be
shows.
able to AI may be able to mimic it, but I don't know, and I hope it never gets
Yeah.
to the point where we can compete head to head
Hmm.
on on writing jokes. I have a creative process. Let's say you said, Frank, we need a tagline for our podcast. So I would put that in my head and go to bed. And in the morning, I wake up, I do a double shot of espresso, and I lie back down in the dark. And I just let my mind go where it will. And oftentimes, it has produced for me a tagline for your show. It's just part of my creative process, just the way my brain works. If I ask it for something and sleep on it, generally it will deliver something. A friend of mine speaks on soft skills, business soft skills, communication, individuation, emotional intelligence. And he goes, Frank, I need a tagline for my soft skills. So I said, okay, Anthony, I'm going to bed. So I went to bed, woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I texted him. His name is Anthony Metton. Anthony Metton, soft skills, concrete results. I got a text back. A, you bastard, you woke me up. B, did you think this up in your sleep? And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who was on Madison Avenue in the advertising business for 3 decades. And we got to know each other, and she had a project she was working on. She goes, I need a title, subtitle. So over the next hour, I think I sent her 11 or 12 title and subtitles. And she calls me back. She goes, I worked on Madison Avenue in advertising for 30 years. I've never seen anybody who could write this good a copy that quickly. And I think that's part and parcel of my mental illness. It's just the way my brain is wired for that activity. It's just the way I put things together.
Yeah, so we hope that AI doesn't get to that level, right?
Yes, Lord, please.
Or maybe AI can have its own category. Imagine one day we have a stand-up special but by an AI.
Yeah. Did you guys
Yeah.
know that AI
might.
is writing like songs right now? Like it could come up with like whole songs.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Like you just
that's-
ask it like, please write me a song about this, and it'll generate
Yeah.
a song in minutes.
Yeah, that's
I've got a friend who's he opened for Jimmy Buffett, and he's from Hawaii, and he does a lot of sort of tropical songs, and he's got a number of them that AI wrote for him, and they're good. He sings it, he puts the music behind it, but the lyrics are good. So, I mean, is it as good as Bob Dylan? Probably not. But yeah, I hopefully it'll never get to that point. But who's to say? I mean, AI is changing and learning fast.
very quickly.
Yeah. I saw there's a comic at Duncan Trussell. He's been creating a bunch of AI songs, and it's really funny. I listened to a couple of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No,
And that I think, but could a human do any better? We certainly couldn't do it any faster.
Not faster, yeah.
Yeah.
But probably better, I think.
Yeah, and
Right now, anyways.
my keynote's my keynote. I will put it in and say make it relevant to the Texas Ice Packagers Association, and so it'll do that. It's my keynote, my stories, but it'll make sure that it resonates with whatever group I'm speaking to.
Yeah, it's helpful in the editing, right? Like you have to edit your speech. You want to like brush it up a bit. It's fine to like use ChatGPT, but like I just find it crazy that one day creativity is just going to be gone, right? We're just going to use it for everything.
I hope that's not the case, because I think that is the last thing that humans can do that machines cannot at this point. And sadly, I don't think they teach creativity much in school. Public schools or private, they don't teach classes in creativity. I think that's a shame.
Do you think this AI, thing is slowly kind of degrading our human connection and even our mental health further as it goes along? Like, what do you think on this AI thing?
Well, if you're a copywriter, you're probably really depressed right now because they prior to AI, they could demand a good copywriter could demand quite a bit of money to write copy. I mean, an amazing amount of money. But ChatGPT can do it probably almost as good and certainly faster, and it doesn't cost anything. So I think social media is a bigger threat to mental health than, because Bill Maher said social media is a cigarette of this generation. It's addictive. Yeah, and they use Vegas technology called variable reinforcement. In Vegas, the slot machine pays off just enough to keep you in the seat. So with social media like Facebook, you put a post up and you got your notifications turned on. And so if somebody hits your post with a like, ding, and you're constantly looking. And what they want to happen is that you look, oh, a share. You look, oh, a couple of likes. You look. So it hooks you on, the average kid checks their smartphone 75 times a day just for the time of day. And of course, then they go down the rabbit hole because they're looking at their likes, shares, comments. So the social media companies work very hard to addict you to likes, shares, comments. It's become a metric among young people, the number of likes, number of shares. One of my friends said, look, Frank, there's a really good looking woman and she has 500 friends on Facebook, and there's an attractive woman, but she's got 5,000. I'm going out with her. It became a metric. Yeah. When I was a kid, cheerleaders and football quarterbacks, that was the top of the social heap. If you're dating a cheerleader, man, or you're going out with a star quarterback. But nowadays it's 500 likes versus 5,000 likes.
I don't know. Me personally, I feel like I want someone who's off the grid almost, just off of those social media platforms, because it creates so much
Yeah, it's just crazy what we value nowadays compared to before, right?
I put stuff on like this. You guys send me a link and swipe copy an image. I'll put it up on Facebook Business, my Instagram, whatever, LinkedIn. But I only spend time and money on LinkedIn. That's where my customers are. There's no funny cat videos. It's business to business, B2B. The rest of it, I just, Twitter, I canceled my account. Elon Musk, one too many anti-Semitic reposts. And I said, okay, I'm done.
Elon's really.
Elon has stirred a lot,
changing that platform quite a bit.
To X
so I
now.
just,
to X.
He's damaged the brand, I think, irreparably. So, because I was on Twitter, I wasn't on there a lot, but I got the occasional client off of there because I was marketing on there. And then I realized if you're running a business and you're listening to this, I would say pick a platform and go deep, dominate. On LinkedIn, in the last 12 months, I probably got 3 or 4 million impressions. I got 4,300 people that subscribe to my newsletter since middle of April. My posts average 1,000 impressions, each one of them. Maybe some get 4, 5, 6,000 impressions. I'm going deep on LinkedIn. Post 5 times a week. So,
okay, so that's like your main platform.
I tell business people, look, figure out where your clients are and go deep on that platform. If it's Facebook, great, go for it.
But be intentional, Don't just doom scroll till the end.
Yeah, and don't just hit it and then stop and then hit it. I do a video post on Monday, video post on Tuesday, Wednesday, and text post Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 2 newsletters a month. And I also do outreach to my first connections. So you got to, I think you should go deep. I'm a big believer in whatever you're doing. Be the best. Be the thought leader, the expert. Go deep. When people come looking for whatever it is you do, they come looking for you, not just anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good advice even for us.
We'll use that. Since we are also trying to grow our own channel, and it's a business too in a way. So
I would say find out where your clients are and go deep on that social media platform. Go all in.
Us, it's mainly YouTube.
Mainly YouTube, yeah.
Well, then I would try to dominate. Make sure the description has the proper keywords. That you got the SEO on page, off page SEO on your videos, and so people can find
thumbnail,
title, thumbnail, all that.
Yeah, exactly,
for sure.
And one of the reasons I posted podcasts like this on my other social media is for the SEO, simply for the SEO value. You post it, I post it, so I get twice the value SEO. And that way I come up higher in the searches on Google when somebody puts in, suicide prevention speaker, whatever, because I'm constantly feeding the Google machine. Somebody said, well, do you do podcasts that only, have this many subscribers or that many downloads? I don't care who subscribes. I don't care who's listening. long as Google is listening, that's all I care about.
Mm.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, because as long as Google's listening, because the podcast gets transcribed, so it's text and video and audio, and Google now searches by text and by audio.
There's a lot of metadata that's attached. Yeah. So
Yeah, I forgive me, but difficult to get rich doing a podcast.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what will come up. I mean,
That's
my
not really
advice
the goal,
is
anyways.
find sponsors, not advertisers. Find somebody who wants to get in front of, you are speaking to their clients and they want to get in front of their clients. And so they sponsor you, pay $500 a month, or no matter how many downloads, impressions, whatever, they just pay a flat fee because they want to be in front of the people that you guys are talking to.
That's kind of our goal.
Excellent. Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for the tips. And
that's right. From a 67-year-old guy, tips on social media.
No, I mean, you got, some
you got something going with your LinkedIn and stuff, so that's good.
Yeah, that's some interesting strategies there.
28,000 connections. Thank you very much.
That's good.
Awesome.
So to wrap it up and to end on a positive note, one last thing we want to ask you is, tell us one of your favorite jokes.
Oh, good question. It's Bill Burr. Can I use a dirty word?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, sure.
I'm quoting Bill Burr. A friend of mine said you got to watch Bill Burr out of Boston. I can't believe anybody that funny I didn't know about already. So I go to YouTube.
Hilarious.
I go to YouTube and I somehow came in the middle of a video, and the joke was, so my mother said to me, "How come you can't be more like your father?" So I said, "Fuck you, I'm leaving."
Oh, he's great, man.
He is my favorite American comic. Jimmy Carr, my favorite. I quoted Jimmy Carr today that my LinkedIn marketing guy is Jewish, and somehow we got talking about, Jews are a minority, by the way. There's only 16 million in the world, and I don't know how many in the U.S., but they should be considered a minority because there aren't that many of them. And I said, because of, obviously the Holocaust. And so that came up, 6 million. I go, Jimmy Carr has a joke about that. A friend of his goes, you can't get a good bagel. Jimmy Carr's in Germany. And one of his German friends says, you can't get a good bagel in Germany. And Jimmy goes, yeah, and whose fucking fault is that?
Oh, man.
Yeah, so those two guys are my current. Oh, and one more, guys, if you ever get a chance, Gary Gulman, Gulman. Gary Gulman. He's got an HBO special where he talks about his depression and treatment and recovery. But he did a Tonight Show where he did 5 or 6 minutes simply on when they came up with the abbreviations for all the states in the United States. Because some used to be 3 letters and some used to be 2 letters. So they decided we need to standardize this into 2 letters. And his bit on how that went, how the people got together and what how that went through the state is just, it's written so tight. Yeah. If you put in Gary Gulman and state abbreviations, it's one of the best 6-minute routines I have ever seen.
Like well written and.
Oh my God. Yeah. He's got a character in there, a woman who's taken, and it's just, he's obviously brilliant, probably because he's mentally ill. But yeah, it's a brilliant piece of writing. If you ever get a chance, Gary Gulman, state abbreviation.
I'll check it out for sure.
Yeah.
Who is your all-time favorite, though? I'm curious.
All-time favorite comic?
Yeah.
Let's see. Currently Bill Burr and Jimmy Carr. I was raised on Richard Pryor. Yeah, as a white middle-class guy in the suburbs, we used to do Richard Pryor's routines to each other. Verbatim. And Cheech and Chong. And I didn't even know what marijuana was. But love Cheech and Chong. I think Gary Shandling. Gary Shandling was probably my favorite overall. Just his style, sort of self-deprecating, woe is me, trouble dating. And he was on the Tonight Show. And he also had a show called The Larry Sanders Show on HBO, which is a scream. So I'd say probably Gary Shandling would be right up there.
Gary Shandling.
Nice.
Interesting. I'd have to
I
check
haven't
out.
heard of, yeah, I haven't heard of
think
that many of them, but I'll look at all of their
Yeah,
material.
he's I think deceased now, but sadly, but very funny. He was a Tonight Show guest host for a while. Then he got his own show, Larry Sanders Show on HBO.
Yeah.
So
For me, one of my all-time favorites though is George Carlin. For me,
Yes.
he's like
Yeah, he's great.
one
Yeah.
of the
he
one of
started
the best.
he started buttoned up with a tie and a jacket, and then he
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
became the hippie-dippy weatherman. And the thing about Carlin was he was performing on HBO well past anybody else in his age group because all of his stuff was topical.
Very much, yeah.
Everything was topical. He had a really long career because he kept it fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in
Constantly
his
looking,
old age
yeah.
and still like cracking up these crazy jokes. But him too, his like just written material I find is just so on point and like
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
very
tightly written.
tightly
and stuff,
written.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I
tightly
like his
written.
style.
A lot of wordplay.
Wordplay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like people, the language we've come to agree upon. Wake up.
Well, and he had the 7 words you can't say on television was a famous routine of his, which now everybody says on television. But back then, you couldn't say those 7 words on television, whatever they were.
It's
Yeah,
probably
Carlin
worse
was,
now.
again, a trendsetter. He was, because up to that time, most comics were set up, punch, set up, punch, set up, punch. Kind of the Catskills, Pocono Mountains, that kind of Shecky Green, the old school. And then Carlin broke the mold. Pryor broke the mold. Red Fox, Sanford and Son. I'll tell you that the guy that was Bob, who was on America's Funniest Videos, Bob Saget. And he was on America's Funniest Videos. His problem was that his act was filthy. People would come to see him in Vegas, let's say, and they're expecting the guy from America's Funniest Home Videos, and they get Bob Saget. And I mean, yeah, blue, dirty, sick, yeah, fabulous.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
they weren't expecting.
Not
They
for
weren't
real.
expecting.
One of the older comics that I really like was Sam Kinison. Like, he used to yell at everything.
You use me.
It's just ridiculous. It's just funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, I
yeah.
tell you who, somebody that passed away that was there was a group of comics called the Texas Outlaw Comics. And Kinnison was one of them. And Bill Hicks,
Yeah,
Never
Bill Hicks
seen
is
Hicks.
great. Yeah.
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 youngest guy ever do Letterman, 18 years old. And he did Letterman right before he passed away, but they didn't air it.
Oh.
They approved the set.
Oh.
He did the set, and then they pulled it. And Letterman said later he was sorry because it should have run. But something in it was really, because he was controversial. During the Iraq War, I got kind of an odd take on the Iraq War. I'm actually for the war and against the troops.
It's ridiculous.
I see people wear a crucifix, with Jesus on it. Do you think when he comes back, that's what he wants to see?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Just
yeah.
him being crucified.
Yeah. Hicks, by the way, was more popular in England than he was in the U.S. When he passed away, they had a solid minute of silence in Parliament in the UK for him.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't seen a lot of Bill Hicks, I was in a Kmart somewhere, and the Bill Hicks special came up on the TV. I was shopping. I stood there for an hour, just watching it.
Wow.
Yeah, do his thing. I mean, it was.
Is he the comic that passed away at a young age? If I'm.
Yeah, he was cancer. I think it probably in his late 30s, early 40s.
Late
very
30s.
young.
Yeah.
Did he wear like a hat as well?
I think,
Is that the one, or am I mistaking with a?
I'm not sure.
No, he was just kind of straight haired, full head of hair.
Oh, okay.
Texan,
Like a suit,
like
I
there's in
think,
the
right?
Outlaw comics with Kinnison.
Who was that comic that I remember that was very good too? Like he would drink too. He had a beer and kind of like a cowboy hat, and he also passed away at like early 30s. I forgot what his name was. Was it Stanhope something? No,
Not sure.
I'm not sure.
I know Kinnison got into a car accident. That's how he passed, I think.
Yeah. And he said one time, a friend of mine hung out with him, that if he'd known when he started screaming he was going to have to scream for the rest of his career, he might not have done it.
Oh my goodness.
And
yeah.
I was a
voice.
doorman in the World of Comedy in San Diego, and Kinnison came down to headline. And Wednesday night, everybody walked out, got their money back. Thursday night, he walked the entire room. They got their money back. So the manager called LA and said, look, you got to send somebody else for Friday, Saturday. This is killing us. So they sent another headliner down to take Kinnison's place. However, 6 months later, the world caught up with Kinnison and he exploded. So he was just ahead of the curve, just a little too early. And then, Paula Poundstone, same thing. I worked with her. I was the middle act. She was the headliner. Only time in my entire career, she goes on stage, they're chanting my name to come back because she was like Kinnison. Her style was just ahead of the curve. They didn't understand what she was up to. But 6 months later, she didn't explode like Kinnison, but she became a headliner and was getting booked frequently because the world caught up with her. Yeah, Kinnison was a man ahead of his time briefly, and then movies and
a lot of drugs, a lot of partying that ruined him too, right?
Yeah, he I can remember being in Oklahoma City and we're leaving the comedy club, and the manager of the comedy club is standing on the back dock of the comedy club watching the highway because I think the room is full. The show's going to start in 30 minutes and no sign of Kinnison yet. I think he had a little trouble, with punctuality. But it wasn't too long after that he passed away. Oh, I'll tell you, Robert Schimmel, little Jewish guy, Robert Schimmel, now deceased. Right, yeah, Robert Schimmel, look him up. He's filthy. He's one of those guys that was just filthy. And so he did cable, never did Tonight Show because you couldn't. But I mean, his stuff was just really well written, but just a lot of it self-deprecating. A friend of mine asked me, he said, would you fight Mike Tyson for $1 million? He goes, I would get in the ring with Mike Tyson and blow him with my parents watching for $1 million. Yeah. He said, I taught my cat to use the bathroom. Problem is, in the middle of the night, I go to use the bathroom, the cat's got the door locked. I had to take a dump in the cat box. The next morning, a friend of mine comes over, he looks at the cat box, and he goes, Bob, what are you raising, a fucking mountain lion? Robert Schimmel, I'm telling you.
He's another one.
Really creative, really dirty. Yep.
Okay, some
Sad
good suggestions there.
Passed on cancer. But just really a sweet guy. Anyway, guys, didn't mean to keep that long.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, we could keep talking forever here.
So we'll wrap up. So this was a great convo. Really enjoyed it. Very insightful and funny at the same time. So just to wrap up, we want to ask you, for all your socials, where people can find you, book you if they want to, all that good stuff.
Yeah. LinkedIn, Frank King and Comedian. We'll get you to my LinkedIn profile, Frank King Comedian. And my website is mentalhealthcomedian.com, mentalhealthcomedian.com.
Great.
And by the way, the humor generally puts me over the top if I'm up against another suicide prevention speaker. When they realize I can lighten it with a little, well-placed, organic, tasteful comedy, that usually gets me the job because it's a difficult subject.
It lightens up the subject a bit, right? I mean,
it makes it more digestible for the audience. Gives them a little relief. They call it comic relief for a reason.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. That's great. No, man, you were very good, Frank King. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks
it was
a lot.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.